In the early 1960s, the streets of Boston, Massachusetts, were haunted by a growing sense of fear. Women, most of them living alone, were being murdered in a chillingly similar fashion. 13 confirmed victims, all strangled, many sexually assaulted, and almost all found posed grotesquely in their own homes. The city was on edge. Reporters called him the Boston Strangler, but over time, the story would grow stranger, more convoluted, and harder to prove. This is not just a story of a serial killer. This is a case about doubt, misdirection, media pressure, a flawed justice system, and the question that still lingers to this day: did the police ever truly catch the Boston Strangler, or was the real killer never found? Chapter 1: The First Victim. On June 14, 1962, the body of Anna Slezers, a 55-year-old Latvian immigrant, was discovered by her son. She had been strangled with the belt from her bathrobe. Her apartment showed no signs of forced entry. Her body had been arranged ritualistically, and nothing appeared stolen. Anna was a quiet, church-going woman. Her son had tried to reach her by phone before stopping by her apartment, only to discover the scene that would ignite one of the most infamous cases in American history. Investigators quickly realized this wasn't just a burglary gone wrong. It was something far more sinister. Within days, another woman was found, then another. In a terrifying pattern, women, most aged 55 or older, were being found dead in similar circumstances. Some had been raped. Others were strangled with their own nylons, belts, or scarves. The killer often tied the ligature into a decorative bow, a macabre signature. It became his twisted calling card. Each crime scene told a story, staged with deliberate cruelty. Drawers were sometimes opened, but nothing was taken. The homes showed no forced entry. The victims appeared to have known their killer, or at least trusted him enough to open the door. The police were bewildered. The forensic tools of the time were limited. There were no fingerprints, no surveillance, no DNA testing. The killer seemed to vanish into thin air after every murder. Boston's Homicide Division found itself under a spotlight. Chapter 2: Public Panic. As the body count rose, so did public hysteria. Women bought deadbolts. Hardware stores couldn't keep locks in stock. Gun ownership spiked. Husbands refused to leave wives home alone. Newspapers ran lurid headlines, each more fear-inducing than the last. Strangler strikes again. Is any woman safe? Talk shows, op-eds, and radio programs amplified speculation. The killer, it was theorized, might be a man posing as a delivery worker, maintenance man, or even a police officer. Rumors spread faster than facts. The city was in a constant state of tension. People began to suspect their own neighbors. Boston police tried to calm the city. Patrols increased. Press conferences became more frequent. Psychological profiling, still in its infancy, was used to try to develop a sketch of the killer's mind. Some profilers believed he was a loner, intelligent, possibly a man with a military background. Others saw sexual dysfunction or deep-seated rage against women. But the killer kept striking. In some cases, he waited weeks. In others, only days. His timing seemed calculated to maintain the atmosphere of fear, and it worked. Chapter 3: The Victim Profile Changes. Then came a strange twist. The pattern broke. The later victims were younger, some even in their 20s. They were more racially diverse. The killings grew less methodical. In some cases, the bodies were left in a state of rage rather than ritual. This divergence raised serious questions. Was the killer changing tactics? Was this a copycat? Or were there multiple murderers, their crimes merged by media into one horrifying persona? One particular case, Sophie Clark, a 20-year-old black student, stood out. The method of her death shared similarities with earlier murders. but not all the details lined up. Some detectives believed she didn't fit the killer's profile. The case was officially grouped with the others, but behind closed doors, the investigation began to fracture. Chapter 4: The Confession of Albert DeSalvo. In 1964, a man named Albert DeSalvo was arrested for a completely unrelated series of crimes, sexual assaults known as the Green Man attacks. He had posed as a repairman to enter women's homes and assault them. In custody, DeSalvo began to talk. He told his attorney, F. Lee Bailey, that he had something big to confess. Soon he was recounting details of the Boston Strangler murders. He described crime scenes with stunning clarity. He even mentioned undisclosed facts, positions of furniture, specific clothing. Some of what he said had never been released to the public. DeSalvo claimed to have killed all 13 victims. Police were stunned, but problems emerged. He sometimes confused victim names. He gave wrong addresses. He described details that contradicted autopsy reports, and there was no physical evidence tying him to the scenes. Still, the confession was too compelling to ignore. Publicly, police celebrated. Behind the scenes, they were divided. Chapter 5: The Trial That Never Happened. Oddly, DeSalvo was never tried for the stranglings. Instead, he was prosecuted for the Green Man's sexual assaults and sentenced to life. The district attorney believed his confession would never hold up in court without evidence. This decision infuriated some. For the families of the victims, it felt like justice denied. For the press, it was an anticlimax. For others, it was an opportunity. Was DeSalvo a patsy, a man seeking infamy? In prison, DeSalvo wrote letters to his wife. He gave interviews. He began to express doubts about what he had done. He hinted he had been coerced. In 1973, before he could make his claims public, he was stabbed to death in prison under mysterious circumstances. Chapter 6: Doubts, Theories, and Conspiracies. Over the decades, DeSalvo's confession came under increasing scrutiny. Investigators noted that several murders lacked common features. Some victims had valuables missing. Others had signs of forced entry. One theory suggested multiple killers. Another claimed DeSalvo may have been mentally unstable and absorbed details from media coverage, tricking even himself. A few detectives believed the real killer was still out there or had died unknown. Books were written. TV specials aired. Some pointed fingers at acquaintances of the victims, landlords, or even corrupt police officers. The case became fertile ground for conspiracy. Chapter 7: The DNA Twist. In 2013, DNA testing brought new drama. Evidence from the final known victim, Mary Sullivan, was tested. DNA matched a sample taken from Albert DeSalvo's remains. For some, this was the final confirmation, but critics quickly pushed back. The match only applied to one murder, and Mary Sullivan's case had handling issues. Her body had been exhumed, re-examined, and possibly contaminated. Was the DNA enough? Forensic experts urged caution. While the evidence placed DeSalvo at the Sullivan scene, it didn't prove he committed the others. And if he didn't kill them, who did? Chapter 8: Legacy of Fear. The Boston Strangler case changed how America viewed serial crime. It led to more rigorous police methods, helped establish early criminal profiling, and inspired a wave of media from books to Hollywood films. But for the victims' families, the story was never about theories or fame. It was about mothers, sisters, daughters, taken violently and never truly avenged. Each victim left behind questions, and each question remains a scar. Today, walking the streets of Boston, you won't find plaques or monuments, but for those who remember, the fear once felt was real, and the silence left behind is deafening. Conclusion: The Boston Strangler case is not just about a killer. It's about a system pushed to its limits. It's about truth distorted by fear, justice blurred by politics, and a society that looked for answers in shadows. At Dark Case Journal, we seek not just to tell the story, but to remind you that mystery lives in the margins. And sometimes, it's the questions we can't answer that haunt us most. This is the story of the Boston Strangler, and it may never truly be over. Chapter 9: Media Frenzy and Political Pressure. The pressure on Boston's law enforcement did not only come from a frightened public. The mayor's office, state officials, and even national agencies became involved. Journalists were camped outside police headquarters. Each new murder fed a media machine hungry for horror. Newspapers published speculative timelines, suspect profiles, and unverified details. Victims' families were hounded. One paper even received an anonymous call predicting the next murder. That call turned out to be accurate. Was it a coincidence? Or a sign that the killer was watching the media too? Detectives began to feel boxed in by expectation. Every misstep, every incorrect statement was front-page news. The pressure to produce a result led to tunnel vision, where DeSalvo's confession was welcomed as a way out. Chapter 10: Psychological Profiling, a New Frontier. The FBI and early criminal profilers began analyzing the pattern. They noted that the killer's behavior escalated. The staging, the use of ligatures, and post-mortem posing suggested a ritualistic element. But that kind of pathology isn't easy to duplicate. Was this a sexually motivated killer, masking his crimes with staged rituals, or something more calculated? The use of personal items from the victims as weapons indicated deep, personal rage. But inconsistencies in the later cases cast doubt on the idea of a singular psychological profile. Chapter 11: Reinvestigating the Evidence. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, a wave of true crime interest led to the re-examination of evidence. Detectives pulled archived case files, autopsy reports, and crime scene photos. Many noted procedural issues, lost evidence, untested samples, incorrect reports. One example involved a report that initially claimed a victim had been raped, but later tests contradicted this. In another case, a neighbor's witness statement was ignored entirely. These irregularities raised questions about how evidence was handled and whether political pressure influenced outcomes. A commission was briefly formed to review Boston PD's handling of major crimes from the 1960s. Though its findings were limited, it revealed patterns of evidence mishandling and conflicting internal theories. Chapter 12: Survivors and Untold Stories. While the 13 murders are the most documented, several women in Boston during that era survived assaults that matched the killer's MO. Their voices were rarely heard. One such woman, Evelyn Carmichael, recounted in a 1987 interview how a man posing as a utility worker tried to push into her apartment. She managed to slam the door and call police, but her report was never followed up. Years later, when she saw DeSalvo's picture, she wasn't sure it was him. Other survivors had similar stories: strange men at the door, persistent knocks, and then vanishing before police arrived. Their cases were often classified as unrelated or dismissed, but some researchers argue they may be the missing links. Chapter 13: Pop Culture and Legacy. The Boston Strangler became a cultural icon, not as a figure of fascination, but as a symbol of fear. Films like The Boston Strangler, 1968, with Tony Curtis shaped public memory. Books, documentaries, and podcasts turned the case into a true crime franchise. But with notoriety comes distortion. The media simplified what was a complex web of cases. The name Boston Strangler gave the illusion of one man, one pattern. That simplification may have robbed victims of individualized justice. For families, the pop culture portrayal often felt disrespectful. Some refused to speak to journalists. Others participated in hopes that attention might renew investigations. Chapter 14. The Open Case Files. As of today, several of the murders still remain open. Despite the DNA match to Mary Sullivan, no court has ruled conclusively on DeSalvo's responsibility for the others. Cold case detectives in Massachusetts continue to review the files. With modern tools, genealogical databases, digital crime reconstruction, AI-enhanced forensics, some believe the truth might still surface. Others warn that too much time has passed and too much evidence has decayed. What remains is a haunting legacy. The Boston Strangler case lives on not just in files and headlines, but in the unanswered questions that still echo through the city. If justice is not just about verdicts, but about truth, then the case of the Boston Strangler remains unresolved. Whether DeSalvo was guilty of one murder or 13, his story is only one thread in a tangled web of terror, trauma, and institutional failure. And that is what makes this story not just terrifying, but timeless.